Okay, thank you, Bob, for that video. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second dialogue on agroecology and agrobiodiversity. This dialogue is hosted by the Inter Sectoral Forum on Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity, ISFAA. ISFAA is working towards mainstreaming agroecology, biodiversity, and ecosystem services in the agriculture sector and landscapes. The forum aims at providing a platform through which stakeholders at the intersection of biodiversity, conservation, and agriculture production can interact to discuss, share knowledge and information, influence policy, fundraise, implement joint programs, and monitor and review progress of their actions. My name is Catherine Mungai, and I welcome you all to actively participate in this dialogue. We are happy to have you on board. Kindly note that this dialogue will be recorded and is streaming. We encourage you to tweet using the hashtag Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity Dialogues. The floor will be open for contributions in line with the topic. Please type your questions in the chat box, and summarized responses will be given after the speaker is done with the presentation. At this point, I would like to welcome Bob Aston to take us through a short ice-breaking session. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. So because today we are talking about climate change and agroecology, we want to do a short icebreaker where we'll just simply look at what usually comes to your mind anytime when you think of climate change. So I've shared a link on the chat. You can be able to click on that link. Now, once you click on the link, you'll be able to see what I've just shared, what comes into your mind when you think of climate change. At the same time, if you're not able to click on the link, you can also be able to use just your mobile phone. So on your mobile browser, just type slido.com. Then you'll be asked for a code, and the code that you'll input will be 621-653. So what comes into your mind when you think of climate change? Just at the back of your mind, anytime when you think of climate change, what usually comes to your mind? Thank you. So far we have, but you can also be able to input more than one entry. So even, for example, you've entered resilience, you can be able to add another entry. So far we have resilience, there's formation, we have climate change, we have drought. So we have unpredictability. Anytime when you think of climate change, you think of unpredictability. Anytime when you think of climate change, you think of resilience. We have flooding, we have crisis, there's hunger. So for those who have not tried, there's the link on the chat. I've again shared the link on the chat. Just click on the link. But at the same time, on your mobile phone, you can just go to whichever browser you're using, then you'll type slido.com. That's SLIDO.com. Then when you be asked for a code, the code that you'll input will be 621-653. So we have unpredictability, we have flooding, we have drought. So majority of us, anytime they think of climate change, they think about gender, crisis, hunger, flooding, unreliable rain. There's weather change. We have urgency. We have frustration. We have floods. We hope that we can be able to have more entries. So far, we only have 10 who have been able to share their input on what they think about climate change. Hopefully, more of us can be able to share. High temperature, more production, raising water levels, there's hunger, there's weather change, we have crisis, conflicts, pests and diseases. We'll just take maybe the next 30 seconds. Pests and diseases, gender, extreme weather. I can also see more production. There's food insecurity, low yields, and more drought. You can still be able
Thanks a lot, Bob. It's very interesting to see how we all view climate change through different lenses. And I think that sets the pace for our next discussion. So now, participants, I take this opportunity to welcome today's speaker, Nancy Rapando, who will be talking about agroecology and climate action. Can agroecology support African countries in meeting their NDC aspirations? Nancy is a multi-stakeholder process facilitator with interest in ensuring convergence of diverse minds towards environmentally sustainable agriculture. She's an agriculture and natural resource management specialist and has worked with diverse organizations in East and Central Africa on policies and programs in the areas of sustainable agriculture, food security, livelihood and natural resource management, and climate change. Nancy is a PhD candidate at the Institute of Climate Change and Adaptation at the University of Nairobi, working on policy frameworks for scaling up climate-smart agriculture interventions in Kenya. We look forward to hearing from Nancy. The floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine, for the good introduction, and welcome participants. I just want to be sure that you can see my slides. Faith, can you give me an indication that I have my slides up?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Thank you so much. Today we are having our dialogue around agroecology and seeing how the different countries through their NDC aspirations are able to have some entry points on implementing agroecology for climate action. Sorry, I am not able to move my slides. Okay, an introduction has been given by Faith, by Catherine, and so my first slide actually shows the world we aspire to see if we're gonna implement agroecology and agroecology aspects in our agricultural systems. But I'll go straight to actually have some discussion on agroecology. But our first video, I believe, has really given us insights on what we mean by agroecology. And actually, I would summarize this through what Altieri in 1995 talks about agroecology being application of ecological sciences to the study, designing, and management of agriculture. And already the IPCC has already recognized agroecology as a practice and emphasizes on the need to use avenues such as sustainable land management, including agroforestry, among others, in the uptake of agroecology interventions on the ground as a way of ensuring we respond to climate change risks. I would say that agroecology has a lot of potential to improving resilience, but also restoring our degraded soils and promoting biodiversity. But what sets agroecology apart from the other practices is actually the ability of addressing both productivity, environmental aspects, and also bringing in the social dialogue, social aspects that affect communities. But what is also important is also the fact that it really promotes co-creation of knowledge that is quite context specific. And so it overrides other practices that are more prescriptive, but agroecology allows communities to describe the type of agriculture that is suitable for their context, and also based on the information that they've been gathering over time. So we believe that even beyond climate change, with agroecology, we are able to achieve results on increasing biodiversity, improving soil health, which has a lot of bearing on mitigation aspects. And then it also has the ability to enhance food security and ensuring a healthy nutrition. That's beyond addressing the climate change challenges. Agroecology has been defined through the 10 principles by FAO that has been expanded into 13 principles. So what happens is that at times we tend to look at agroecology in form of maybe one practice, but it would be good that we are also refocusing back on the principles as outlined here. FAO talks about majorly 10 that has been expanded into 13, but I think amongst them, I'll just talk about them in passing, that we have issues of recycling that is now going big on what we are calling circularity. Agroecology looks more into reducing the use of external inputs, and I think the video talked a lot about this. Issues of soil health, we know how that is quite linked, what practices are there, and right now there's a lot of focus on regenerative agriculture that really looks at how do we bring back the soil health aspect and ensure that the soil biodiversity is also kept intact. When we are dealing with animals, issues of animal welfare are quite critical. I've also talked about the need to maintain biodiversity. Synergy is all about interaction at farm level, interaction, how do the plants, animals, and the trees interact. And the critical practice here that we mostly talk about is agroforestry. The question of diversification, at the farm, it has both economic and biodiversity and soil health benefits on the farm. So those are some of the critical principles. I've talked about knowledge co-creation and issues around how do we integrate both scientific and indigenous knowledge. It is something that even the research world is grappling with, but we've seen a lot of success even when it comes to addressing climate resilience using indigenous information. Issues around social values and diets. Agroecology is quite specific on looking at how communities design their food systems that are based on their culture. And then when it comes to fairness and connectivity, we are actually talking about how are we connecting consumers and producers and really trying to develop short food systems. We promote food systems that are based on the local economies. This also has a lot to do with mitigation, whereby the carbon footprint on food is not so much. Issues of land and natural resource governance, that's under good governance, and really like how do we look at producers as good managers and guardians of natural resources, but how are we also incentivizing them to actually continuously develop practices that manage our environment very well. And then the last one is around participation. How do we see greater participation of producers and also consumers in the food dialogue? So these are very critical principles. And when you're working on agroecology, there is need to look at them a bit using more of a circular eye rather than picking one principle and thinking that this is the far we've moved on agroecology. But the biggest dilemma is about the transitioning. How do we transition from conventional to agroecological systems? And I think this diagram for me, I'm very passionate about it because most of the time we grapple on what is agroecology first. Then you've understood agroecology, understood the 10 principles, but still wondering, like in Africa and in Kenya, where I'm speaking from, where food systems and agricultural systems are highly conventional, especially when you come to the books of the policymakers and you're wondering, how are you gonna do the transition? And you see that it is critical that we develop the best practices, if it's around soil conservation, integrated pest management, and reduction of chemical inputs. How do we develop a profile of best practices and then seek for state support when it comes to substitution of external inputs and then going into biological processes? How do you see the state supporting us to continuously integrate what farmers have known has worked into the existing policies and information that our policymakers have? So that is it about agroecology. I needed at least to emphasize what it is all about, because rather than us looking at it as a common practice that only is based on organic production systems. So I would like now to make a connection between agroecology and climate change. And this diagram is based on a study that was done by BioVision and FAO that looked at how agroecological elements address both adaptation and mitigation. And having looked at the principles, it's very clear that aspects around synergy and diversification would work a lot on issues on issues around reducing climate risk, but we also have a lot to do with aspects of soil health that will work a lot on the mitigation benefits. So when you look at aspects around knowledge co-creation and the understanding that climate change is quite place-based and the risks that farmers face, the practices might not be prescribed to them, but they will need to develop practices based on the risks that they face, or tells you that agroecology has a lot of potential on addressing both adaptation and mitigation aspects. So on the NDCs, we understand that NDCs are commitments by countries on the adaptation and mitigation ambitions as per the Paris Agreement. And when you look at most of the NDCs, the agriculture sector features very prominently as different countries develop interventions in agriculture to address climate change in their countries. So what we did country-based analysis, but this was based on some of the already submitted NDCs and looking at, are there any entry points that we can use to ensure that we integrate agroecology as part of the practices in addressing climate change in our countries. So we picked some of the NDCs. There was no specific order, but we picked a number from East Africa and other African countries. And let's see how they are integrating climate change, and we could do, they're integrating practices that are agroecological. And if they even mention agroecology as one of the pathways they want to use. So the first one we picked on was Ethiopia. And when we looked at the word search, we found that agroecology is not explicitly mentioned, but there are a number of entry points. The NDC talks about increasing the share of agricultural land under sustainable management practices. It talks about aspects of recycling the residues. In livestock, they are keen on enhancing efficiency. They talk about diversification and also diversifying issues around diversification for adaptive livelihood alternatives. And then what they also come out clear is that livelihood options need to be friendly and they need to coexist with natural ecosystems. So that's a very strong word that shows us the ambition towards bringing agroecology in this dialogue. And they're also talking about expansion of agroforestry. So when you look at the Ethiopia NDC, these are key entry points that any actor working on agroecology can use it to start seeing where how agroecology can really help to take this NDC to the next level. In Somalia, which is unique, that there's no explicit mention of the word agroecology, but still they talk about agroforestry, sustainable land management, including climate smart agriculture practices. And I would like you to note that most of them talk about climate smart agriculture, and maybe it's a discussion we can have on how agroecology can be an entry point in terms of what countries talk in terms of climate smart agriculture. There are issues also around good governance for Somalia, especially on forest and environmental management, but this could create an entry point on issues around how farmers can be incentivized to also integrate both forest and environmental interventions. They talk about promoting climate change resilient traditional and modern knowledge. And I think this one is also good when you're talking about co-creation of knowledge. But for them, in terms of that, they're looking at sustainable pasture and range management systems. So how do we develop an agroecological package based on traditional knowledge and modern knowledge for the range management areas, and mostly maybe looking at the livestock sector. So I think that can form a very good entry point. Zambia, they don't have also an explicit mention of agroecology, but in their summarized NDC, they talk about guaranteed food security through diversification and promotion of CSA, and they are very keen on conservation of germplasm for land races and their wild relatives. And I remember among the principles, the issues around biodiversity are very critical. And then they talk about taking a landscape at watershed level to enhance synergies. So do we look at these landscape approaches as an entry point for agroecological interventions? And on water management, they are very keen on recycling. This is one of the principles that agroecology believes in. So would we be thinking about an agroecological package on water management at farm level? And so this, I think this forms a very key entry point for a country like Zambia. Tanzania, very close to where I'm speaking from, they also don't have an explicit mention of the word agroecology, but they talk about producing in an environmental friendly way. And if we can remember the definition of agroecology in terms of farming in an ecologically friendly way, I think this really matches it. And then they're still very keen on climate smart agriculture interventions, but they also insist that it must be environmentally sustainable. So as much as climate smart agriculture has been mentioned as a pathway for a number of countries, but we see Tanzania going ahead to define what they want in terms of their climate smart agriculture package, that it must be environmentally sustainable. They're talking about livelihood diversification, and they also, and I think there's a pathway towards knowledge co-creation. And then on waste management, they're talking about recycling and reuse. So I think quite a number of terms that can really give an agroecological entry point. Nigeria are very explicit. Their NDC mentions promotion of agroecology. And I think when you look at all the NDCs that were reviewed among the 6, I think their approach is very explicit in terms. And they talk about building the capacity of local communities in good governance while ensuring equitable access and distribution of resources and benefits. So I think this one comes a lot on aspects of good governance that we've talked about, and also in terms of fairness. They're also looking at CSA, but they say that the CSA approach needs to have a range of measures taken forward as an integrated approach for managing the landscape. So issues of synergy, issues of diversification really fall well here. They are very explicit in saying farmers to take agroecological measures that increase the resilience of farming system, as opposed to promotion of high external inputs in farming systems, and they're also opposed to large-scale industrial agriculture. So I think when I say it's quite explicit on showcasing how they want to develop an agroecological pathway, we feel that Nigeria has really tried to do it. They also talk about need for benefits to go beyond yields. And they give agroforestry as an example on how it integrates both crops, livestock, and trees with food, feed, carbon fixing, and mulching benefits. So in this, they are very explicit on saying that when they are taking up a practice, there is need for it to look at issues around managing the environment, managing the people, and also ensuring that it's quite friendly to the environment. On waste, they are very clear on 10% reduction in methane emissions from organic solid waste through diversion to composting. So we do feel that Nigeria has been quite on point on really talking about agroecology, and they talk about creating new partnerships to convert organic agricultural waste. This is not water, it's actually waste into animal feed. So this is a good example, and maybe it's one of the NDCs that we could look at it as an example, although most of the NDCs that I'm talking about here have already been submitted, but we also know there are countries that are yet to submit, and that gives us a good entry points maybe to also have dialogues with them. Kenya, we don't mention the word agroecology in Kenya. And in Kenya, the entry points, we look at implement CSA in line with the CSS strategy with emphasis on efficient livestock management systems. They're talking about incorporating scientific and indigenous knowledge, building resilience of agricultural systems through sustainable land management, soil, water, and other natural resources. And we also give ourselves a target on agroforestry and establishment on community governance structures for resource management. So though we don't really define how we want to go with on CSA in terms of like other countries, but I think we also have a number of entry points, especially when we are talking about sustainable land management, soil and water management. But considering country policies as an entry point, let's look at a case of Kenya. I'm nearly getting to the end of my presentation. The National Climate Change Adaptation, the NCAP for Kenya, that is the I think it's 2018, 2030, I'm not able to give very accurate information on that. They talk about a number of adaptation and mitigation actions. And among them, there is resilience building through management of climate risk in agricultural systems through agroecosystem, landscape, and community-based approaches. So as much as we might not get the details in the NDC, but countries, through their country policies, showcase also a number of entry points. So we don't just need to stop at the NDC, because a country like Kenya will really look at the NCAP in terms of the main implementation document. And then down into the sector, they'll be looking at the CSS strategy. So I decided to look at the NCAP first. And you see, we really talk a lot around agroecosystem, landscape, and community-based approaches, efficient soil management, conservation of agrogenetic resources, and they also talk about sustainable intensification. On mitigation, there are issues around resource efficiency, increasing tree cover, and also making efforts towards land degradation and neutrality, and scaling up nature-based solutions and sustainable waste management systems. So beyond the NDC, we also, I think, need to look at the country policies and see what are the country policies talking about. That is the end of my presentation. And beyond the country NDCs that we got from the UNFCCC website, and we were looking at the newly uploaded NDCs, we also looked at the 10 elements of agroecology in terms of explaining agroecology. There is also a document by the CGR on contribution of agroecological approaches to climate resilience, and also a publication by BioVision on the potential of agroecology in building climate resilient livelihoods and systems, and then a study by BioVision, Millennium Institute, and the government of Kenya, looking at the impacts of fertilizer subsidies and alternative policies as one of the policies to help in the transition from conventional towards agroecological pathways. I want to thank you for having listened, and I just want to give back the session to Catherine, who is our moderator for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. That was quite interesting and quite enlightening. I don't see any questions in the chat, and apologies if I have missed any, but this is an opportunity for us to hear from our participants today. So if you have a question, kindly raise your hand and I'll be able to see it. Or you can, a question or a comment or any additional information that links to the topic that we've been discussing today on agroecology, climate change, and the NDCs. So if you have a question or a comment, you can either raise your hand and I'll be able to see it, or you can post it in the chat box. Okay, so Nancy, so far, okay, thanks. I can see James Wanjiko has raised his hand. So James, kindly proceed. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. I did not get the whole thing because maybe I was in another meeting. I came in late, but maybe my question or my query would be, are there any researcher who on the ground dealing with the maybe combination of the agro and ecology sustainability production? Any research or any undergoing research? Maybe what are the findings so far that they have received, if there is any? Thank you.
Thanks, James. Nancy, did you get the question regarding ongoing research on the ground?
Sorry. I think there is a lot of research that is going on depending on the pathway we want to take. There is general research going on agroecology and maybe its impacts on food production and everything. We also just doing a general profiling in Kenya of agroecological interventions to showcase to stakeholders what is happening, and maybe the ISFAA done in Kenya as one of the target countries. When you look at the references on the on agroecology and climate resilience in Kenya, with very good findings on how the two interconnect. And probably when we can also, I'm sure someone can share that link to the study to showcase how agroecology contributes to climate resilience. So quite a number of studies going on. So I wouldn't know which pathway you want the study on, but and also right now, there's a big movement on scaling up agroecology. So we are seeing a number of countries starting to, a number of countries and also a number of organizations starting to work on agroecology and also starting to provide research on giving evidence on how agroecology has worked on the ground. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nancy. There's an agenda question now. What is the connection between agroecology and gender, and what needs to be done to ensure that there's gender mainstreaming in agroecology? And then in a follow-up question, is there any research that has been carried out to showcase the connection between agroecology and indigenous knowledge, and how do the two connect? So Nancy, keep that in mind, but I will allow Gideon Nyamasio to raise, to ask his question or give his comments.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for a good presentation. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, now, what would be the real connection between the current thinking in agroecology and the conventional agroecological zones in respect to climate smart agriculture?
Thank you, Gideon.
I need to note that question better.
Sorry, Nancy.
I need him to repeat the question.
Okay, let me repeat the question. I'm saying, what would be the most logical connection between the current thinking in agroecology and the conventional existence of agroecological zones in respect to climate smart agriculture?
Wow, I hope I can try to answer Nyamasio's question, but in case there is someone who can also help me to respond to it in the group, because this is a dialogue, we are having a dialogue, so someone can still respond to this through the chat, or if you have any evidence. But I think, Nyamasio, as we have said, that agroecology can quite be place specific, and also it's based on the context and also the available knowledge. And so based on the different agroecological zones in Kenya, it is actually possible to design CSA interventions that integrate agroecological principles, because CSA does not necessarily mean that the agroecological principles are integrated. So it is possible to develop, for example, CIAT has already developed the profiles for the counties in Kenya, but you can decide that you map out the risks in the different agroecological zones, and then you develop a CSA package based on agroecological principles for that area. So that's just the thinking I can give. But in case someone else has a better contribution to that, I think it's possible. But bottom line is that for us to say we are developing a CSS strategy for an area, then we need to know the climate risks. But if we have to put agroecological principles, when we want to develop the best practices, is that we need to look at what contextual information exists among farmers, what have they been doing, and also develop practices that are ranked based on the principles of agroecology. BioVision has already a tool called Agroecology Criterion Tool. And when you develop the CSA practices, you could use the Agroecology Criterion Tool to show how the practices are ranking in terms of key principles like efficiency, synergy, diversification, and everything. So that's the answer that I can give, though it's a bit theoretical. I wish we could explain it better using a local language. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And Matthias has also shared some reference materials in the chat box, a study done by FAO and one done by CCAFS, linking CSA and agroecology. So you still had two questions, one on gender, agroecology and gender, and one on indigenous knowledge. So perhaps you can respond to those two.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. We have a dialogue session. I think, Bob, I think there was a presenter who was willing to talk about agroecology and gender aspects. And I am not sure which date that one is, but we also know there has been issues around, can agroecology be like a burden to women, or is agroecology the best entry point because of a diversified farm, where if we have issues of land use where the land maybe is more of male owned in terms of cash crops, since agroecology has aspects of diversification, does it give maybe space for women to also participate by growing more of the intercrops on that farm, diversifying the farm and all that? So I think we have a presenter who will be talking about that, and I would like to invite the person asking to that session. Thank you. Probably, Bob, you'll be checking on when we have the dialogue on agroecology and gender, and then we can ensure that we get enough information for dissemination. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I've just checked that the dialogue on gender is going to be on 27th October, if I'm not wrong. So the participants can look forward to that. But I think there's also a comment that equity and inclusion are key components of agroecology, so that in that sense, gender mainstreaming in agroecology is happening in principle. So thank you very much, Matthias, for sharing that. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any hands. We still have a few more minutes.
Yeah, Catherine, I think there is a question because we were talking about the NDCs and climate action, and
yes.
I just had a question to the panel. Maybe we can dialogue around this question to actually enhance this presentation. By the time we are sharing it, maybe we'll have more insights. I just wanted participants maybe to dialogue on what avenues they feel exist for increased integration and recognition of agroecology in climate change policy and practice. So how do what avenues exist out there that we can use to increasingly see agroecology being recognized? Thank you. So in these, I've just requested that members can chat or give us answers or carry up their hand and just give a suggestion.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. So this is a question to our participants to share with us their thoughts on opportunities for recognition and integration of agroecology into climate change policy and practice. Nancy, I think even as we wait to hear from Faith, do you have a comment?
Yes, Catherine, I would like to contribute to the dialogue. As Nancy has asked what we need to do to mainstream or rather talk about agroecology, on my part, I feel that there is need to keep on speaking about it. There is need to engage in detailed conversations, not only in the boardrooms, but also to take the conversation down to the farmers, take the conversations to the schools, and ensure that we have all the information that we need to share. And also, as we are going out there to share the information, we also we also be ready for a learning session as well, because I believe as much as we have information about agroecology, down there where the farmers are in the grassroots, there is a lot of information that we can also benefit from. So it is talking and talking and talking so that at least we are able to walk the journey together. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Faith. Do we have another comment? I think Gideon says there's an echo, but I think maybe it was only on his side because I didn't hear an echo on my side. Faith, perhaps you can check on that. We also have another suggestion, Nancy, that you can embed agroecology into the training curriculum and advisory services. And I think this is one of the things that ISFAA is currently trying to achieve by undertaking a study on the curriculum to see to what extent agroecology has been integrated and to see what opportunities are there to embed this in the current curriculum. Then we also need to showcase best practices on agroecology to farmers. That's another suggestion that is coming in through the chat. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Susan, for your inputs. So Nancy, there was also the question about linking agroecology to indigenous knowledge. And I can see Matthias has posted a comment saying that the link between indigenous knowledge and agroecology, co-creation of knowledge, transdisciplinarity, and valuing culture and traditions are essential elements of agroecology. So I think that also links to what Faith talked about, that we need to go to the grassroots and we need to engage with the communities. Then Hannah says we need to document and share best agroecology practices. The hands that are still up, that is Faith and Gideon, those are previous hands. So unless they would like to chip in once again, they had already talked. So Nancy, do you have any additional comments?
Okay.
Second, I can see Joseph Mulema has raised his hand, so let's give him an opportunity. Joseph, can you hear me? You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, you can proceed.
Yeah, I think thanks, Nancy, for a very good presentation. I think one of the key things we maybe we need to also look at is how do we use the new advanced biological science practices or experiments to determine the benefit of the different agroecological practices we do on species richness and species diversity. And in this, I'm looking at issues to do with metagenomic sequencing, microbiome analysis, which really help us to understand more what kind of practices we are using and how do they contribute to the conservation of different species, be it the beneficial bacteria or even fungi or even those that are very dangerous. Because at the moment, normally we use more of the increase in productivity and the increasing in yield and so on and so forth. but without necessarily understanding what is exactly behind that, what kind of practices are improving something and what kind of practices could be detrimental to some of these organisms. And through this, we can also probably help in addressing policy towards sustainable land use management, which if you look at them in totality, can help in raising awareness about agroecology and biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your inputs on expanding our scope in terms of the sciences and bringing on board different experts. I can see Wanjiro has raised her hand. Please unmute yourself and share with us your thoughts.
Hi, greetings to you all. Thank you, Nancy, for your presentations. I just want to contribute to the discussion on what, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Proceed.
Yes, on agroecology and what spaces exist. I think the key avenue we have at the moment is climate action. I mean, everybody, you just need to listen to media houses to know that there is a lot of discussion about climate change. And I think we know as people practicing agroecology and people lobbying for agroecology and advocating for it, we know that agroecology is one solution for mitigation and adaptation. But how we amplify our voices so that we are not preaching to the converted, to me, is the big challenge. Ourselves we know, but are we occupying the spaces for people to know? Are we supporting demo gardens in counties so that the farmers want to know how to practice agroecology, they have a place they can go? Are we talking about it in media houses? If you listen to any of the vernacular media houses in Kenya, all they talk about is agrochemicals and how they can solve farmers' problems. But we know agroecology is what will help our small-scale farmers. So the challenge perhaps for us as practitioners of agroecology is how can we occupy the spaces that are already available to us better? And until we answer that question, I think we will continue preaching to the converted, pun intended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Wanjiro, for that intervention. I can see we have one more hand from Percy Njeri. Percy, kindly unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
Thank you very much for the forum. For me, I'm a practitioner in making of organic agricultural inputs, but I have realized when it comes to the market, there's a in terms of farmers are not really ready to adapt to adopt the new technologies, especially the organic technologies. So how can we be able to enhance that kind of knowledge, and also how can we be engaged in farmers' forums so that we can be able to help them in adopting this kind of technology?
Okay, thanks, Percy. I think we lost you a little bit, but I think the gist of your presentation was that we need to work with the farmers to encourage the adoption of new technologies and focusing mainly on agroecology. So thank you very much. I can see we are now at around 3:23. So do we have any last minute intervention? Anyone who would like to contribute? In the meantime, a lot of information has been shared on the chat. So kindly go there and pick what you think would be of interest. And I would like to invite Nancy to share her concluding remarks and also to give her comments regarding the interventions that we've received so far regarding the integration of agroecology into climate policy.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you so much to the participants who really supported us in answering this question. And I think what I am picking more is that we need to get out there and behave the way the private sector behaves. We should avoid preaching to the converted. As much as the converted, we need to be together just to have a well comprehensive conversation so that we are speaking together. And then let's get out there, push the message to the policymakers, push the message through media, and push the message even to the young generations that are starting to grow up. So as the Inter Sectoral Forum for Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity, I think a challenge has already been thrown to us. We need to take agroecology into schools. We need to take agroecology into political spaces. We need to take agroecology into the media spaces. I think also one thing that I picked is something by Mulema. He talked about understanding what is behind the practices we are pushing for in agroecology. And actually, Mulema, if you can reach out to us for a session, we still have slots for sessions. Maybe you want to use this also to push out such level of information. I believe that would also be good. If it's still in the cooking pot, you can tell us when you can give it to us, because we really want more of you to come out and give this information to the practitioners, so that when the practitioners, we get out to the public and start talking to the policy makers, we are able to answer the hard questions that also require hard science. So I want to stop there by thanking all of you and saying, let's take the message out there. Let's continue sharing information, but let's also ensure the information reaches to the targeted groups. You're welcome to reach out to ISFAA. Probably, Faith, you could post an email where participants could reach out to if they want to be part of the Intersectoral Forum for Agriculture, for Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity. And unfortunately, this is still being hosted under the government, under the Kenya umbrella, but we believe that with time we shall be moving out there to take it even to the bigger African area. Thank you so much, Catherine, and that's where I want to stop.
Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. That's well noted. We are winding up now, and I'd like to invite Bob, who has one last activity for us to do together as we put together the key takeaway from the dialogue. So Bob, I think you can take over.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So maybe in the next 3 minutes, we just want to look at some of our key takeaways from this dialogue. So I've shared a link on the chat. You can be able to click on that link, but at the same time, you can also be able to. At the same time, you can also be able to just go to your mobile browser. Then on your browser, you just type slido.com. Then you'll input the code that is indicated on the screen. Let me just share my screen. Nancy, you're still sharing. So we just some of our key takeaways from this dialogue. So you can be able to click on the link that we've shared on the chat, but at the same time, you're also free just to go on your mobile phone. Then you input you type slido.com. Then once you ask for a code, you just input 621653. So you can use either of the two ways. Either you click on the link that we've shared on the chat, or just on your phone, type slido.com, then input 621653. So hopefully you can be able to share some of our key takeaways from this dialogue on agrobiodiversity and climate change. So far we've had communication is key. So one of the key takeaways from today's session on agrobiodiversity and agroecology, and also there's more exchanges and knowledge is required to get a mutual understanding of what how it can benefit farmers and consumers in Kenya. So we have more exchanges and knowledge is required to get a mutual understanding of what agroecology really is and how it can benefit farmers and consumers in Kenya. Then you also have communication is key. Just click on the chat, just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. Then we've also had agroecology is key for sustainable food system and safety. There is more sensitization and awareness creation. Spaces for co-creation is important. Entry into early education sharing this knowledge. We have to move from talks to action. Well, agroecology and agrobiodiversity are intertwined. At least we've had entry into education sharing this knowledge nourishes nature and consumers. Agroecology is key to resilient agriculture. Schools are also good entry points for agroecology. You can be able to, you are free to add more than one entry. So even if you've already added an entry, you're also free to add an extra, you're free to add more than one entry. Any other person who wants to share their key takeaways before I hand over back to Catherine? Agroecology and climate smart agriculture are one and the same. We have to embrace research findings in order to convince our policymakers to adopt the agroecology technologies. So there's more exchanges and knowledge is required to get a mutual understanding of what agroecology really is and is how it can benefit farmers and consumers. Agroecology is key to resilient agriculture. We need to engage farmers to adopt agroecology technologies, sharing the links provided here in our own environment cycles. Agroecology is a necessary tool for climate action. Let's amplify its voice. Streaming in policy, legal framework. So I think I'll now hand over back to Catherine. And thank you everyone for those who have shared their key takeaways from today's dialogue. Catherine?
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Bob. It's good to hear from everyone about the key takeaways from the dialogue. And we're just slightly over time, so thank you all for your patience. We've come to the end of our second dialogue, and the conversation will be uploaded to the ISFAA YouTube channel and Facebook page, and this is going to be circulated to everyone who has joined us today. Kindly note our next conversation will be on Wednesday, 18th August at 2:30 p.m. East African time. And our speaker will be Caroline Bosire from International Livestock Research Institute. And she'll be talking about linking dairy intensification to water and land use. Finally, I encourage whoever would like to be a guest speaker to send us your name and topic to the email address that is going to be shared in the chat box, or to send a message via the YouTube channel or the Facebook page. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for participating in this dialogue, and we look forward to hosting you again on 18th August at 2:30 p.m. East Africa time. So thank you very much and take care.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Bye-bye. Bye.
Yes, the presentations will be shared to everyone who's joined us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.